up YouTube? Welcome to today's video. Today I want to talk to you about my experience using the Leica Q2 over the past 2 years or so. There has been a lot of hype over the years about this camera, and by now there is a successor out. So the Leica Q3 has been released earlier this year, and there's a good amount of hype around that camera as well, and it's pretty much sold out everywhere. But since I've had 2 years worth of experience with the Q2, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it and just tell you about my overall experience of using this camera as my primary camera. Well, yeah, again, over the past years. So let's go. Before we talk about the Leica Q2, let me give you a bit of background. So back in the day, meaning November of 2021, when I bought the Leica Q2, almost exactly to the day 2 years ago, back then I had a Fuji setup. I was an APS-C only shooter, and I've never ever in my life had a full frame camera. So buying the Leica Q2 was a pretty big step for me in many regards. First of all, it was by far and away the most expensive camera that I've ever owned, that I've ever bought. Again, it was also the first full frame camera that I've ever bought. And yeah, because of those two reasons mainly, it was a major jump for me. Again, back then I had a Fuji setup, meaning a Fuji X-T30 and a couple of lenses to accompany that camera. And I also had the Fuji X100V. By then for almost 2 years, I think. So anyway, obviously I didn't buy the Leica Q2 to replace my interchangeable lens setup with the Fuji, but I did in fact buy it to replace my Fuji X100V. And that was absolutely not because I was unhappy with the Fuji X100V in any way, shape or form. Quite the opposite actually. I loved the X100V so damn much, and I had so much fun with it that it was pretty much the camera that I took with me 90% of the time, if not more, before I bought the Leica Q2. But especially because I liked that camera so much, I wanted to know what the Leica Q2 is like. For the simple reason that the Fuji X100V, for me, in my mind anyway, at the time was always kind of limited by the fact that it was an APS-C camera. So you always do this conversion in your head, like what would the aperture be on a full frame camera, what would the lens be on a full frame camera, and so on and so forth, and how much more dynamic range or how much more low light performance could I get out of this image if it was shot on a full frame camera. And therefore I wanted to have the same concept, meaning a fixed lens camera that you can pretty much take with you everywhere, but in a full frame body. And the Leica Q2 was advertised as exactly that. Obviously it's a bit bigger and a lot more expensive, but at the time I had the money, so I took the plunge. Since then I've made at least 2 videos comparing the Leica Q2 to the Fuji X100V, and if you want to see more about that, check these videos out. But to make it short, the Leica Q2 pretty much was everything that I wanted it to be. It took some time to get used to it, and especially getting back into editing my photos, which is something that I haven't done with the Fuji, because Fuji cameras do have these Fuji JPEG recipes which work insanely well. The Leica Q2 back then didn't have anything of the sort, and so I got back into Lightroom and had to get used to editing my files again, which was a bit of a learning curve for me, but now I do kind of enjoy the process, which has never been the case before, and it's not really an issue for me. So in the end, after about a year or so of owning the Leica Q2, I ended up selling the Fuji X100V. I'm not exactly sure if that was the right thing to do, but to be completely honest with you, I have rarely, if ever, missed it or missed having the Fuji X100V. And also I got a great price for it because, as you're probably aware, there's quite a lot of hype, or at least there was quite a lot of hype around the Fuji X100V. So yeah, secondhand prices for these are completely through the roof. I think I got more for it used than I had to pay for it when I bought it brand new. It's kind of ridiculous. But anyway, same thing, by the way, is kind of true with the Leica Q2. So I haven't tried to sell this camera. In fact, I'm very much planning on keeping this camera. But when I bought my Leica Q2, I bought it for 4,800 euros. And shortly after that, there was kind of a price hike. So the prices went up to 5k euros. And by now, or last time I've checked anyways, the prices for a brand new Leica Q2 here in Germany was 5,800 euros. So new retail prices have gone up by about 1,000 euros since I bought this camera, and I am fairly certain that I could sell my Leica Q2 for maybe 4.5 grand, I think. Again, I haven't tried it, which would mean that I would barely take a hit compared to what I had to pay for it 2 years ago. But anyway, that's kind of beside the point. I wouldn't recommend buying cameras as like an investment thing, but for whatever reasons, it has just kind of turned out this way for me with these two specific camera models. So with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the issues that I had with the Leica Q2 over the past 2 years. And there's not actually a lot to talk about. This camera has performed almost flawlessly for the entire time. There are only two really minor things that I could somewhat complain about. One thing is the macro ring, which is this guy here, because if that guy is slightly off center, the camera will refuse to work. And at first, I honestly didn't know that. The first time I experienced that issue was in Iceland, and to be completely honest, I just thought that some water or something had gotten into the camera and now it was damaged, but that wasn't the case at all. It worked perfectly fine. I just had to put the macro ring back into its place. But yeah, that's pretty much it. One time the camera has stopped working completely. So for whatever reason, it froze to death. So it didn't react to any input. So I had to pull out the battery, wait a couple of seconds, put it back in. And after that it was completely fine. And that was the only incident of that sort for me anyway. So the camera has worked absolutely flawlessly the entire time, or almost the entire time that I've owned it. And with that, let's go right over to what I really like about this camera, and that is just how robust and how rugged this camera is. I really bought this camera to be kind of my only companion camera for both everyday kind of situations and travel. And that has actually worked out really well for me, meaning that I have carried this camera in my EDC backpack or in my EDC bag pretty much every single day since I bought it. And also I've brought this camera with me on every single trip that I've done since I bought this camera. So this guy has been with me to Italy, to Lake Como, to New York, to Iceland, all over southern England, and probably a good number of other places as well. And it has been through it all. I've used it for hours on end in blizzards, in heavy rainstorms, out in the cold, out in the hot. Doesn't matter, not at all, not an issue. Yeah, it has just performed absolutely flawlessly every step of the way, and I couldn't be happier about it. And one fact that I absolutely do appreciate about this camera is the fact that this guy does actually have an IP52 rating. So with many camera manufacturers, you will get a statement of the sort of the camera is weather resistant. Like my Sony a7 IV, for example, is rated as weather resistant. But what does that mean exactly? It's kind of a just trust me bro situation from these manufacturers. And that's not only Sony, that's like most of them, as far as I'm aware anyway. The same was true with the Fuji anyway. And with Leica you do get that IP52 rating, so you do kind of get an idea of how good the weather sealing and the dust and moisture resistance actually is. And for me that kind of helped a lot in the sense that I actually felt comfortable to use it out in the rain for hours on end, despite this being, again, by far and away the most expensive camera that I've ever bought. Let's be real, because if I would not have been as comfortable to use it out in the rain, I certainly would have used it less, because I simply couldn't afford to break a camera that is this expensive within just the first, I don't know, a few weeks or months of owning it. That's just not an option. And knowing Leica prices, if this thing would actually get damaged, I imagine that you would have to pay an arm and a leg to get it repaired. But anyway, that is actually kind of a good segue into one of the things that I certainly do not like about this camera, and that is the overall price. Leicas are kind of luxury items, I suppose. It's a German brand, it's a German manufacturer. These Leica Q2s are, as far as I'm aware, actually not produced in Germany, but yeah, you're paying a high price for it. And part of it obviously is because it is also a great camera, and it is manufactured to a very high standard, and it looks fantastic, it feels fantastic, and all of it, but you're also certainly paying for the name. There's just no way around it, and that is true for every single accessory that you can buy for the Leica Q2 as well. So if you want to have something like a spare battery, which I have 2 of these, and these little puppies are 160 euros or something, so not exactly cheap. Another thing that I absolutely love about this camera is the image quality. Again, at the time that I bought this camera, I was an APS-C only shooter, and all of a sudden having a full frame camera with 47 megapixels was just kind of a game changer for me. Then again, kind of not, because I am in no way, shape or form bashing the image quality of any of the Fuji cameras that had 26 megapixels or something. They were still fantastic, and certainly the images do hold up to this day, no question about that. And I think megapixel count and sensor size is not even necessarily the most important factor when it comes to overall image quality. But anyway, the image quality, or the quality of the images that you can get with the Leica Q2, is absolutely fantastic. And I have loved using it for that reason. I do also love the in-body image stabilization, which is something that the Fuji X100V didn't have, and that I've missed a lot. And also the fact that you do get an f1.7 aperture lens on the Leica Q2. It's a 28mm lens, as I'm sure you're all aware. And if you combine all of that, so the full frame sensor, in-body image stabilization, and a wider aperture, you obviously do get vastly better low light performance compared to the Fuji X100V. And that is another thing that I absolutely did appreciate. And that also was really part of the reason why I wanted to give the Leica Q2 a try, even though I already had the Fuji X100V. Because that camera, while it does work in low light conditions, it is somewhat limited, especially because it's lacking that in-body image stabilization. Maybe with the next Fuji X100 we'll see about that. But yeah, while we're talking about the lens, I absolutely love this lens as well, and I do love the fact that it is a 28mm lens. I did honestly have some growing pain. I started out not really loving the 28mm focal length. When I first got this camera, it was a bit too wide for my liking in terms of the field of view. And I had to get used to it, especially coming from the Fuji X100V, which is a 35mm full frame equivalent. But yeah, I've absolutely grown to love the 28mm lens. It is perfect for almost everything, especially for everyday lifestyle documentary kind of photography. So the stuff that honestly I'm doing most of the time. And it also does work very, very well with slight cropping, especially because you do get such high resolution photos. So I have absolutely no issue whatsoever to crop into the image to a degree so that I get the equivalent of something like a 35mm lens as well. And lastly, the final thing that I absolutely loved about this camera is the fact that Leica actually bothered to give this guy firmware updates even years down the road. This camera got its last firmware update not even half a year ago. And that is especially great considering that shortly after, Leica released the Leica Q3, so the successor. That's just absolutely fantastic. And these firmware releases, by the way, really added to the functionality of the camera. So that it wasn't only like bug fixes and stuff. Leica really gave the Leica Q2 new features even 4 years after it was released and shortly before they released their new Leica Q3 model. So that's just absolutely fantastic and certainly something that I wish more camera manufacturers would do. So yeah, in conclusion, I absolutely still love the Leica Q2, even 2 years down the road, even after the hype, and even after switching to Sony from my other Fuji cameras. I switched to a Sony A7 Mark IV, so I got a full frame camera for my video setup now as well. And still, even though I do now have the Sony A7 IV, the Leica Q2 still is the one camera that I'm always going for. It is the one camera that I bring with me absolutely everywhere, and I love it to death. There is by now the Leica Q3 out on the market, and obviously I have thought about upgrading, but there are two major reasons why I'm probably not going to upgrade to the Q3 in the foreseeable future. The first reason being that you simply can't get it anywhere. It's completely sold out and the waiting list is ridiculous. It's like 6 months or something. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't get a Leica Q3. But the other reason being that, honestly, there's just nothing that I would really like to change about this camera. And also, I'm not quite sure if I do like the tilt screen that the Leica Q3 has. I mean, it's obviously very functional. I'm not debating that in any way, shape or form. And it is also certainly a feature that I did like on my Fuji X100V and that I did prefer on the Fuji X100V compared to the Fuji X100F that I had before that. But I think, or at least in my mind, to my eye, Fuji did a much better job of integrating that tilt screen into the camera body. I think it really looks strange on the Leica Q3, at least on the images of the Leica Q3 that I've seen so far. I haven't actually seen it in real life, I haven't actually used it. One thing that I would absolutely be interested about is the new and improved EVF, because the EVF of the Leica Q2 is, well, it's okay, but it's not exactly perfect. And I would also very much be interested in the new video capabilities and especially the new autofocusing system. So those might be reasons to upgrade at some point, maybe if it becomes available. But honestly, right now, I don't feel like I'm missing out on very much. Aside from the Leica Q3 though, there are now 2 other cameras that I think would make for a great alternative to, well, actually the Q3 and also to this Leica Q2 as well. And those are the Sony A7C Mark II and the Sony A7CR. I'm not going to talk too much about these because you can get way more information about these in other places. I think these are probably better cameras in many regards, and obviously they are also interchangeable lens cameras, which gives you the benefit of using other lenses as well. But obviously that does also kind of take away from the charm of it, maybe. I personally do think that Leica's Q cameras do look better than the Sony A7C cameras, but that is personal preference. And from what I've heard, the electronic viewfinder on these Sony A7C cameras is absolutely terrible. And for me, that would be one major reason why I would not buy any of the Sony A7C cameras. I'm sure they are great cameras in their own right, but having a decent electronic viewfinder on your camera is just so important for me. I know if you've watched some of my POV style photography videos featuring the Leica Q2, you might think that I'm using the LCD screen most of the time anyway, but that is absolutely not the case. I'm pretty much only using the LCD screen for photography when I'm filming a POV style video, because that, I think, is maybe more engaging for the viewers, because you also get to see something on the action cam footage. But if I'm shooting and not doing a POV video, I'm pretty much always using the EVF. It feels just so much more natural to me. Yeah, so a good EVF is just an absolute must, and for me, the primary reason why I wouldn't go for a Sony A7C camera. But anyway, again, in conclusion, I am very happy with my purchase with the Leica Q2, even 2 years later. no regrets whatsoever, and I do hope that I will be able to use this camera for many more years down the road. That's it though for this video. Let me know what you think about the Leica Q2. Do you have one? Do you maybe want to get one now that there are some on the second-hand market, now that the Leica Q3 is released? Obviously there are Leica's M cameras, which are in a bit of a different niche, and I would certainly love to get something like a Leica M11, but honestly I cannot afford a Leica M camera system. That's just completely out of the picture for me. I would love to, but not a chance. Anyway, let me know what you think. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time, take care. Bye.